We seem to have sorted out those connection issues with Emergency Management Minister Murray Watts. Minister, good to have you back there. So we have the announcement from your government that it will conduct a 90-day review into the $120 billion 10-year infrastructure pipeline to try and find savings in the budget. The New South Wales and federal governments have set aside $312 million for 57 projects across 26 disaster-declared local government areas in northern New South Wales. Can you assure flood-hit locals that these 57 projects are safe despite this review?
Thanks, Kenny, and sorry about that technical fail before. Well, what this infrastructure review is really all about is making sure that the federal government has an infrastructure program that can actually be delivered. What we saw under the last government was all sorts of small projects that really aren't the province of a federal government being announced and then not actually being able to be delivered because of a lack of funding and a lack of skilled workers. So that's the point of this review, is to have a good look at what the infrastructure industry has the capacity to deliver, what funding is available to deliver them. And we've made very clear that any project which was an election commitment of the Albanese government or that is already under construction will go ahead. So I've seen the Daily Telegraph report today that is making claims about all sorts of projects that aren't going to go ahead. There are many projects on that list that are actually already under construction, so people have got nothing to be concerned about in that respect. But beyond that, we've obviously got to have a look at what projects can be delivered, given the funding that's available and given the real pressure on skilled workers that we have at the moment.
Okay, so the short answer is there are no infrastructure projects related to flood recovery that will be reviewed.
Certainly, any projects that are being funded through the government's infrastructure department that are already underway or that were election commitments will proceed. Of course, through our disaster management portfolio, we do fund separate projects, and I've got nothing in front of me to suggest that they won't go ahead.
So will there be a prioritisation happening, an adjustment of prioritisation with flood recovery infrastructure projects as a result of the budget?
Yeah, well, we always work with state governments to make sure that the flood recovery projects can be delivered and that there are the skills that are needed to be able to deliver that. And some of those flood hit regions, there are some real issues about getting the range of skilled workers in who are needed. But if there are some of those projects that need to be rejigged in order to actually make them delivered, then we'll work with the state governments on that. But as I say, we haven't received any proposal from the New South Wales government to shift the timeframes of any of those projects.
There's signs the El Nino is coming in and things are drying out. New South Wales facing an increased threat of bushfires, but new data shows just 8% of planned bushfire hazard reduction works have been conducted in the past 12 months. Any chance we can catch up this winter, or are we looking at a dangerous summer?
Yeah, that is one of the things that we're facing, Kenny, with the changing in the weather conditions. And in fact, just yesterday, I was in Albury-Wodonga making an announcement about emergency management there and speaking to some of the local fire officers. They were talking to me about the difficulty they'd had with the reducing window weather-wise to be able to do that fuel reduction work. It is important that that work gets done to be able to protect people in the lead up to a disaster season. And as you say, we know that the weather conditions are changing and we're moving into a more dry pattern. So I'm confident that the state governments, who obviously are in charge of these things, are taking steps to try to get some of that fuel reduction work done. But the reality is we are dependent on the weather. The weather can't be too wet, it can't be too dry. And so we're a bit reliant on that as to when that fuel reduction work can be done. But I'm confident that the state governments will do as much as they possibly can before we hit the real fire season this year.